As the quotes in the beginning clearly stated, is that if there is nothing to talk about, then there is no story. It's very simple. And if we don't drive change, then nothing happens. And we will talk about that today. We will run the math class, and we will give away our story about how we transitioned from Universal Analytics to GA4 and actually started to make use of it in a way to gain insights that actually helps the marketing team to take wise decisions. My name is Johan Bjertin. I'm working here at SQLI as the, I don't know really, head of data insight, competence lead within this area, and together with Leo from IHM.
Yeah, my name is Leo Pignon. I'm the CDO of IHM, meaning I'm responsible for our digital strategy.
So with that said, we have a lot to cover, and this is a story I think most of you will feel a little bit familiar with it. GA4, how many of you are using it?
Raise your hands.
Not that many. How many of you are planning to start using GA4? No one. Okay.
How many prefer GA3? No one.
No one either. Okay.
It's going to be a tough room, man.
This will be a tough room. Okay. But when it comes to data, I mean, the beauty of ordinary, it's when we are very comfortable, we know what we have. The KPIs and things we are tracking, they are reliable. They are proven. Universal Analytics have been around for 10 years. Even more urgent than these things. So we have something like sessions. And the great thing about these high-level KPIs is that the marketing team and the board at IHM, they did understand what they mean. We need to drive traffic. And once they are on the website, we need them to convert in some way. And then there is something called UX design and user experience and these things that is somewhere in between here. We had session duration. Actually not a really good metric. It's just the average of two extremes. But that's the way it is. It's something we've been looking at. And we also had bounce rate. Maybe one of the more important metrics when it comes to evaluating pages, landing pages, and how they perform. We were pretty comfortable with the acquisition model. We didn't know what to expect. The landscape we were within was kind of beautiful.
And just to mention there, of course, we had businesses that were dependent on these insights, on these KPIs. We had spent many years, at least people like me and Johan had spent many years teaching our business these KPIs. So you could communicate them to other management and take decisions on them in a real way. However, stuff happened.
Yeah, stuff happened. The nudge of unknown. Okay. So there was something announced the 14th of October, 2020. Google Analytics 4 was released. It's quite a while ago. And to start with, I mean, okay, let's compare it. And I think we kind of answered the questions ourselves. But okay, the iPhone 16 has been released.
I think so.
Yeah, and people are talking about how great it is and yada yada, all of these things. It's the same thing when Tesla or some other company releases a new car or a new model. Everybody wants it. And it was kind of the same when GA4 was launched within the digital marketing field. Because we had something called auto-event tracking. We didn't have to implement this ourselves. Predictive analysis, great thing to have within the tool. AI, to actually help you gain insights, answer question. You can actually write your question and ask GA4 to give an answer. And anomaly detection as well.
And of course, we were all thinking, oh, great, this is GA3 with another layer. We don't have to build all these things because at least people like me have been building stuff like this along the way. We're getting it out of the box. This is great, right? That's what we were thinking was going to happen.
So, yeah, as we were talking about before, it was like Universal Analytics on steroids.
Yep.
A lot of cool stuff to do here.
Great.
So, but we started to explore it a little bit. And of course, we realized that it's not that useful. It's like it's not ready to be launched. It's like it's a POC. It's something that is not production ready at all.
Essentially, the way when we got it, the feeling was this is an unfinished product. It was lacking a lot of things that we were used to in all of our reporting driving our business. We're making important business decisions on this data. And we were looking at the new interface, and a lot of stuff is missing. It's not there. How am I pushing this through my teams? How am I generating value in my streams with this? I don't know.
So to give you a few examples of the differences that we noticed, this is the reports we used to have in Universal Analytics, and this is for the channel grouping. Universal Analytics, acquisition, all traffic channels. We all know that path. It's super easy to reach this report, and we can directly do some insights and eyeballing the statistics here to see what is happening. In GA4, it looks like this. You have to click on reports, lifecycle, acquisition, traffic acquisition. So the UI and the UX is not optimal. We have added more steps to reach the same kind of information. Then we have to mind the grouping. So here is session default channel grouping. Then we have user default channel grouping. Then we have preferred. There's a lot of things, a lot of confusion going on here.
And if your head is hurting by now already, you're not alone. I mean, the major difference, as you can see from GA3, those of you who have used it, it's quite simple to pick up and start using. It's quite easy to implement in your teams. This was an entirely different story. This user is different. This is somebody that knows analysis on a completely different level. It's required to actually get value out of this, rather than the old one.
Yes. Another thing, when we look at the device categories, once again, audience, mobile, overview, very simple. In GA4, we have to click on reports, user, tech details, and then we need to use the device, select device category from the dropdown. All of the steps needed to get the same information that was there out of the box in Universal Analytics. So, at first we realized that it takes a lot of time. The UX is completely different. We don't have any standard reports. So how should I use this tool? Another thing that is important for us, this is a screenshot from Google Universal's demo site. So that's why, I mean, even Google didn't implement this correctly because they don't have any data for sessions with product views and such things. But anyhow, this is just a click away to get the shopping behavior. In GA4, this kind of report doesn't even exist. So you have to build it yourself in something called exploration reports. And at first we thought, okay, this is kind of fun. We can drag and drop dimensions and stuff and see how we can build our own dashboards and such things. But we realized that it's really limited. You can't even combine all of the dimensions and metrics, even though they say that the scope or the schema for GA4 is event-driven. For those, I mean, this report is kind of important for all e-commerce websites to look at the checkout and the whole procedure. So this is the recipe. We're trying to squeeze it in. You have to walk through all of these steps to actually build this report instead of having it out of the box. So we had some positive ideas to start with, all of this new cool stuff, and then we realized that no, we don't really want this anymore. What should we use it for? So then we realized that we have to at least start gathering some data. Your team, I mean, you were supposed to deliver metrics towards the board, to other members of the marketing team, and we need a transition to understand what is actually happening behind the scenes.
Certainly, we got all of that basically for free. And back in the golden days of tracking, of course, you had GA3 or the earlier versions of Google Analytics. You had cookies forever. You could see everything all the time, and it was easy to sell. It was easy to communicate. All of a sudden, we were in a situation where we couldn't, even out of the box, do something as simple as optimize our checkout, which is everybody that works with e-commerce has to do this. It was missing a lot of fundamental things that we actually needed, and we realized we're going to have to do something here. We're going to have to build something here, whether it's in GA4 or elsewhere, but something needs to be done.
So the analytical tech stack we had or configured was using a GTM client side and pushing data to both Universal Analytics and GA4. And basically, we didn't care about the GA4 data to start with, just collect something and see what it is. And we came across a lot of roadblocks, of course. The data wasn't there really. We couldn't access it. How do we handle custom dimensions, for example? But we were slightly learning something. Crossing the unknown. Okay, we thought that we had some time. I mean, Google has, they are doing so many different updates across all of their product suites. The Universal Analytics had been around for some time, so we were expecting that we had the time to actually explore this even more. But then we got this in the face, that they will lock it down within 30 days, at least when this screenshot was taken. So we were a little bit stressed. We needed to find a way to actually get going and add some gasoline to the project. And you were calling me and say, hey, have you seen this?
Yeah.
What do we do about it? Can we just ignore it? Will it happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that a year later, the 1st of July 2024, Google has announced that they will remove all of the Universal Analytics data. And we said, it will not happen. Basically, this is the first time Google sticks to deadline.
Yeah.
1st of July.
The only one you wanted them to kind of be a bit late with, because I'm really stressed about this.
So we didn't know, and basically I've been doing a lot of exporting of Universal Analytics data into BigQuery and such things to help clients keep the data they have. So that actually happened over the night. So a little applaud for them that they actually stick to it. But okay, now there is a deadline. We need to do something about it. And we can't just resist the moment and reject it anymore. So we started to do a lot of research online. We read through the documentation that barely existed. It's such a new tool. And the documentation didn't align with the tool anyhow, because they have changed a lot of features. So I think Google couldn't keep up the pace of updating the documentation as well.
And it was just to mention on that, when it was rolling, we were attempting to roll this out on our teams, read the documentation, please, go into the tool, have a look. We were running into roadblocks immediately, and lots of stuff was missing. They didn't have the things they were used to. It was buggy. The value generation from this data was maybe 20% or less from what we had before, meaning the issue was bigger than we thought. And a part of that has to do with the modular design of GA4. It requires a lot more from the user. You can't roll it out on a marketing department and expect them to just pick it up and go. Essentially what happened is they stopped and said, I'm not an analyst. How do you expect me to work with this? I have no idea what to do. Complete stop right there.
So these were some of the challenges we had. And along the road, we realized that the data that was reported in GA4 didn't, the math, it didn't sum up. We could have a report saying that we had 100 sessions from organic search, 100 sessions from direct traffic. And in the last column, we had 300 sessions. So doesn't we expect more from an analytical tool? For example, counting. It's a fairly common feature. So then we had to export the data into Google Sheets and running the math ourselves, and realized that, okay, even the export didn't work. So did the tool actually help me with anything? No, I had to correct it myself. Can I rely upon these data? So then...
Just to add to that, sorry, but it was using a completely different language for some things. For instance, sessions, devices, and a number of other things, which made it very, very difficult to understand. It wasn't readable in the same way that GA3 was before. That's an important thing to remember. So we were realizing as we went on, we understood more and more that they are speaking different languages, and I have to speak the same language. People are still asking me about sessions, devices, all the old questions needed still to be answered, and I didn't know how to translate.
So at this point, we spent some time, and we talked about it before. Okay, GA4 is free to use, but basically it takes a lot of time to implement and understand. So we are actually spending money, resources, a lot. Now you're looking at me. Why?
Yeah, that guy's not for free.
Okay, so we came to an end. We realized we had to start over. And the feature that was announced and was that we can export the raw data directly into BigQuery. And that's a pretty cool thing, I thought. I mean, I'm a developer myself since many years, so writing SQL and such things, heavy stuff. But then we realized that, okay, it kind of opened the doors a little bit for us. But we were still running, so to say. There was a deadline, and we needed to get things up and just have it implemented and let the board and the marketing team confirm that, okay, this is working for us. So we changed all of that and started to use BigQuery and exploring the possibilities. And it was fairly neat, I would say, especially for me that writes SQL. We will talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But we started to explore data in another way. We could answer questions that are, I don't know what it's called in English really, but the soft ones, like if the design actually is helping us for conversions, how can we dig into that by numbers? So we actually turned back to some of the core questions we had about the website, and during this time we were also undergoing a facelift.
Yep.
So we had a lot of questions like, okay, we know these things, common mistakes. Just because something is easy to use, is it a good user experience? Maybe not. Another thing that we stuck to is that just because it's beautiful, it's not magically easy or intuitive to use. And the last one is, okay, if we're not answering to the user's needs and expectations, then we're doing something really wrong. How can we use GA4 data to dig into these topics?
I mean, just to mention that real quick, we had replaced our entire front end with a new one based on user behavior. So we had, as you mentioned, we'd worked a lot with user behavior from GA3. And of course, we want to move this as our standard tracking platform into GA4. But we realized that, well, we're going to have to build it if we wanted to report in the way that we need to drive business on our site. Another thing just wanted to mention real quick is that one thing that happened, because we're getting the raw data here, we realized there's a lot more in here than is available in the GA4 tool. We can do a lot more things that are not readily available if you're just stuck with the GA4 interface.
That's true. And it was a little bit of an eye-opening thing for me, because when we're trying to calculate sessions, users, and look at user behavior, then I need something like a user ID. I need something like a session ID, and I need to know if it was the first, second, third, or fourth time someone were visiting the website. So it's basically 3 dimensions. It's called the user pseudo ID, it's session ID, and session number. These dimensions doesn't exist in the GA4 interface. So I can't answer anything of that by using the tool. But in the BigQuery export, all of these beautiful dimensions exist. So consequences of an attempt. Okay, we learned a lot. We realized that we were walking in the wrong direction. We had to stop it. We had to implement BigQuery. So our tech stack actually contains BigQuery export for the raw data. We realized that we can write queries to have a look at what is happening on the site right now. GA4 doesn't offer the real-time report as Universal does. Here it is. I can click a button, and then there is a record in the database. And then we realized that, okay, how can we visualize this? Then we need Looker Studio. And by writing tailor-made queries in BigQuery, validating that they are working, exporting them to Looker Studio, then the marketing team had the tool they needed. We have wiped away everything else that they don't need.
Essentially, we were building the things that we need specifically tailored to our needs and to their needs and to their level as users. And what level do they need? What complexity do they need? How is this actionable in their day-to-day and strategic life?
So BigQuery was the way to go. And it's fairly easy to configure it. You're just following these steps.
Super
and
easy.
A few more. And you need a credit card and set up all of these things to get going. Okay, once we have this in place, now I don't want to scare you with the next slide here, but we will actually look at something that is very beautiful. This is SQL. This is the way we are writing our queries. Okay, I guess, how many of you are actually writing SQL queries?
Hey, more than use GA4, that's interesting.
That's perfect. Well,
good for you.
Yeah, okay, you guys and girls will be the heroes in the future, or from now on, because this is the way to go. We realize that the raw data, it's raw data. We have to clean it. We have to modify it a bit. We have to remove outliers. We need to categorize sessions in another way. Even the raw data has some bugs. For example, paid advertisement with Google Click ID ends up at organic search. So we had to correct these things. But this query here is actually, we shouldn't walk through it. I will just scroll through and say, okay, it takes a few lines of code to answer it. But once it's done, it's fairly easy to just call it and have this graph. So what are we looking at here? You came to me, or actually one of your team members came to me and say, hey, we are evaluating the traffic we're paying for from education and course
Portals,
market places. So they promise us to drive traffic that will convert. And you were about to renegotiate your agreement with them. And the question was, can we actually tell if this is working for us?
And the reason that's important is we have two business areas where we had the need to understand how they were performing on their own. The way that the data was working is that this data was covering each other, so you can see how each was performing on its own. We needed to separate those and evaluate each channel. How much are we paying for it? How much conversion are we getting? Because these are different business models, which means they convert in different ways. You couldn't evaluate them by the same way.
Yeah. So the task for me was have a look at sessions or users that converted sometime over the last 6 months. And they should come from this specific channel grouping that we defined ourselves as course portals or something like that. And they should convert. And we wanted to see what is that user journey like. So one criteria was that we wanted to group sessions, like those that are within the specific business field. They needed to visit at least 3 more pages within the same session than within the other field, or none at all. So the threshold was 3.
It's important to remember the complexity of that, because we couldn't write any fast and hard rules what would define a session to be a part of a particular segment. Let's say, for instance, you came to our site, you looked at 4 pages that don't really say anything of the product. You looked at 2 pages of this business area and 5 of this one. Well, I want to categorize that as a particular type of behavior so I can take action on it. But we needed to write that logic, which is what this is.
Yes. So the end result that we wanted is a graph telling us that, okay, when we are opening some specific courses on the website, we want to see if the traffic that comes from a specific channel is actually driving traffic to that business area. And we can see that these sessions actually are within the places that we want them to. It's like when a band releases a new CD, even if they don't exist anymore. But I mean, that particular date, we will know that there is a lot of people in the record store area of the grocery market, for example. And how can that impact, for example, the number of customers in the cafeteria? And we can see these logics, how they merge together. So in a BigQuery, we can write this stuff. We can plot it. I will show you this in a couple of seconds as well. Then we came to this conclusion that, okay, there is actually something in GA4, but it's not that easy to get hold of the data. You need to rethink how you're gathering the data, who is doing what. For example, will you write the SQL code? No. Basically, you will ask me or someone else to, I need this query. Run it, evaluate it, implement it, and export it to Looker Studio in an automated way. And then you can have a look at the reports and showcase for your stakeholders. So this is just one slide of the dashboard we have in Looker Studio. The data we have down here is actually the query we had. We can see here that the gray area are the blended sessions. We can't really tell. Are they within the YA area or the BS business area? We can see that the yellow part here rises when we're opening new classes. And we can then evaluate and say, okay, yeah, these traffic sources actually gave us visitors and they were navigating the site in this business segment.
And this kind of design, just to mention that, which is really important, I mean, it's an important part of delivering value on this data. A marketing person can read this. They can take actions on this. They have the tools that they need to deliver value in what they do. Whereas GA4, that was a full stop a lot of the time. This you can actually use.
So we built in some flexibility, of course. We can select the date range. We can select the type of session. If we just want to have a look at, okay, which traffic sources drives the blended sessions? Which traffic sources actually drives traffic that makes people sign up for a course? And we can show you this later on, but the answer to a question we had is, you were paying to drive traffic that didn't convert.
Yep.
And we had a look-back window of 6 months for this. So I guess you re-evaluated the agreement with them?
For that particular channel, we were able to reevaluate and sign a completely different kind of deal, costing a lot less, losing no revenue over it, more or less.
Yes. So let's just have a little look at this. Where is...
Question?
Yeah, question, of course.
How do you market them? What are the most important channels?
How do we market? Sorry?
Yes, how do you market? How do you get this traffic?
Well, the mix has changed quite drastically, actually. We're a lot heavier on organic nowadays. And that has to do with strategic choices and other choices. The important thing of this is that we were through a transitional period where we're leaving a lot of the other channels, or the spend on some of the channels we used to spend a lot on, I mean, display, for instance, and others. We were reducing our spend on like AdWords and stuff like that. We had to work with new ways to look at how the channels were performing and how the customer was performing, especially with organic. So it's a shift. I mean, there's a strategic shift at the same time as you're changing platforms, at the same time as we switched the architecture, we switched the entire front end. So it was a lot of moving parts at the same time. The important thing to remember is we were thinking about the customer the whole way and the user experience, which is kind of what helped us get through all of this and understand what are we developing, what do we need to actually deliver on, what KPIs do we actually need.
So this query here gives us this result. We can visualize it directly in a big query, and this is just a stacked bar chart. To answer the question we had, let's shift over to the channel groupings. And now we can see here, this pink line here, that represents organic traffic that drives it towards the IH business segment. And down here, these were the ones we were paying for. Paying a lot, and they drove some traffic.
This is the business area we were paying for.
Oh, that one.
You see that? We were paying a lot for that.
So once we had this, we could then head over to this dashboard. I will just randomly select some dates here. And then your team could actually have a look at, okay, something is happening here. Why are the blended sessions increasing?
Yep.
Yeah. And we can dig down and say, okay, I just want to have let's have these sessions and the reports updates. And now we can see that, okay, which are the traffic sources. So that's one way of doing it. And the other thing that I wanted you to show, this is something, I showed this last year as well, but this is really, really cool. So now we can actually ask questions like, okay, should we rebuild the search function on the website? Let's figure out or check what data do we have. So we pulled out the data for sessions, in this case, a sample of 500, and want to see what is happening when you're interacting with the search. So firstly, these sessions, for some reason, they are reloading the start page for some reason, and then we can see that they are sticking to the search result, indicating that they are refining the search term. They can't find what they want. Basically, this chart doesn't have any figures at all, but your board, when you said, we don't want these yellow lines, then they realized, okay, we have to do something. So sometimes data from GA4 can actually be used to build these kind of paths and understand how are people navigating the website, how can we make something better by optimizing the design, cutting down certain flows or paths that isn't needed.
Well, and it's an important tool in moving the dialogue from kind of opinion-based, and this is what we would like to have on the site, and I think this stuff is awesome, to this is what's actually happening to the customer. And just moving that perspective using data, using this kind of reporting was a real change in the way we could, I mean, redesign our site, but also work with tracking and reporting. What are we actually reporting on? What are we basing our decisions on? Is it the customer or stuff that we would like to have there? And a lot of the time, it's stuff that you would like to have there, right?
Yes. So that's the story we wanted to share with you today. It's possible. You just need to drive change. You just need to accept it. It's not that easy to see this last slide, but actually we are planning of releasing an LP-skiva. And I don't know if you noticed, but all of the slides had something like, it was like song titles.
Yeah.
Refuse of the call and such things. Yeah.
Did it work?
Maybe it worked. I don't know really. Okay. I hope that you have learned something and that this is something you can use in your way of working or introduce, and maybe also just grasp the surface of what is possible, and maybe not just React GA4, even though it's a bit more complicated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.